my 17F boyfriend, 18 meters, cares way too much about my purity, and it makes me uncomfortable. As the title says, I feel like my boyfriend cares way too much about my purity, as he calls it. A little bit of background information is necessary here. My reputation at my school is a daddy's girl who never does anything bad. I've been at the same school since 6th grade, and while I'm friendly with pretty much everyone, my only close friends who know me super well are 2 other girls in my grade with the same reputation as me, and it's been that way since 6th grade. Since I've been at my school, I've shot a handful of guys down and everyone knew I hadn't done anything vaguely sexual. My boyfriend, whom I've been with for a little over a year, September 2019, was the first person I ever said yes to when they asked me out, and he was the first person I ever kissed. For the most part, our relationship has been great. We've had our share of problems, but what relationship doesn't? I love him, and he's my best friend. No one makes me laugh harder than him, and I'm happy when I'm around him. Something that's been making me uncomfortable the closer we've gotten is how much he cares that I stayed pure. Sometimes we'll just be doing whatever, and he'll say something about how he's so happy I waited for him to have my first kiss. I've heard through the grapevine that he has told his friends that before we started dating I would have aced the rice purity test, even though all we'd done is kiss. When I asked him a few weeks ago what made him like me, it started out sweet. He thought I was pretty, sweet, funny, smart. He loved our banter, and then it made me uncomfortable when he ended it by saying he knew I hadn't done anything with anyone else. I don't know why he makes such a big deal about. I knew he had kissed a few other girls before he asked me out, and I dropped it because I really liked him, so I thought it wasn't important. We don't talk about it every conversation obviously, but when it does he just seems like he cares about it a lot. I really don't like that. He probably would never have asked me out if I wasn't pure in his eyes. Whenever he says stuff like this, I can't bury the thought that he just sees me as this pure girl he's going to marry one day and be his matronly wife. Is this weird behavior? Is this something that I shouldn't be made uncomfortable about? I don't know though. Maybe I'm just making a big deal out of nothing and trying to poke holes in a relationship that is otherwise great. Maybe he's just respecting me. He is my first relationship, so I have nothing to compare it to, so I don't really know how I'm supposed to handle it. I'm worried if I say something about it, I'm just going to offend him. Maybe he's just being a teenage boy who kind of has a big head about getting a girl who shot down several guys, including a few of his friends. The only people in my life whose opinion I trust are my 2 best friends, and one of them thinks it's kind of creepy and not okay, while the other one thinks he's just kind of awkward and I should take the compliment. I think I could use some more advice. Any input would be appreciated. My advice for a new dater is listen to your gut. This makes you uncomfortable. That's enough for it to be important. There are reasons why I agree with you. For example, men who care about purity end up very controlling and overtly protective of their property. They see normal interactions as symbols of impure behavior. Going out to lunch with male friends, or having male friends at all, etc etc. But you should listen to yourself. You already knows it makes you uncomfortable. Trust yourself. How uncomfortable it makes you, what you are going to do about it, how far you are going to push back against this behavior. Only you can answer these questions. I'm over here wondering, what the hell kind of 18-year-old boy gets this excited over purity? Firstly, you are a human. You are not a piece of fruit, you're not an object. Purity is a social construct, and it's bullshit. I think you know that, and that the idea that he's basically objectifying you as a pure thing that only he has is bothersome. It's not respectful. It's the exact opposite of respectful. Your value as a human isn't tied to whether or not this kid thinks you're pure. And what's going to happen when you start having normal adult experiences? What happens if, God forbid, you're sexually assaulted? Where's his purity bullshit stance on that? That's the problem here, is that he's not treating you like a person. He talks about your purity. Is he talking about you? Does he love you? You should absolutely tell him you're uncomfortable, because I'd love to see his reaction to being told that you don't like being referred to as a pure thing he has. My husband and I read this together. We're 34 and 37. We've been together for 19 years, so yes, high school sweethearts. We are not here to tell you to break up with anyone. But my husband, a married man, said your boyfriend's purity talk sounds really creepy. This is weird, and no, it's not about respecting you. He values you at least, in part because you're untarnished by sex. It sounds like he would not value you as highly if you had gone out with anyone before him. In my opinion, that's kind of gross and very immature. Most people have multiple romantic relationships in their lives, and that should not make you less desirable to future partners. You might be interested in reading about the Madonna whore complex. He doesn't respect women and is valuing them by whether or not a man has tarnished their purity. He doesn't think of women as people, but objects that can become dirty or used. Don't be with someone who doesn't respect you. It may seem like not that much of a big deal, but it speaks volumes about his character. Find someone that loves you and wouldn't care what you have or haven't done with somebody because they should love you for who you are. It sounds like he's fetishizing your virginity / inexperience. I've been in similar situations and it's always super uncomfortable because you're almost made to feel like you're some sort of challenge to overcome or a special addition to their tally. A well-adjusted person would not be obsessed with or fixated on your purity. You can try talking with him about how this makes you feel, but to be completely honest, I don't see that conversation going very far. There are nicer people out there who won't make you feel this way, I promise. I didn't lose my virginity until I was 21 and everyone at my school knew I wasn't having sex in high school or dating much. I was very upfront about it when I did date and it never bothered me because I always did things at my own pace with no pressure from my peers. I started talking to a guy who formerly went to my high school but moved away and was a year or two older, and we got along great. He came to town to visit, and we went on a date. The date went well, and I kissed him at the end of the night. Later, and for weeks, he would comment how he felt so lucky to have gotten to kiss me, and he would feel extremely lucky to go further with me. We had talked about doing more. I was immediately uncomfortable with the way he described it as being lucky, like it was some sort of goal to achieve. I eventually was so fed up with his idea of sex, and how he viewed me as a prize, that I dumped him. If it makes you uncomfortable, that's a sign. Listen to your gut. I went to school with a guy like this. He ended up marrying his pure girl, treating her like trash. When she tried to flee the emotionally abusive relationship, he tried to kill her, because divorce isn't the good Christian thing to do. I'm not saying your boyfriend is this level of crazy, but I grew up and live in a Bible thumping area, and guys who thump the Bible this hard in this manner are never good people. They will do anything, if the Bible even remotely endorses it, if it helps them get their way. When a guy does something that makes you uncomfortable, move on. You're young. You'll find someone else. This is an issue. His comments also mean that if you do have sex with him, he'll tell all of his friends. It'll become gossip all over school. He'll share if he thought it was good, if you did X or Y. Don't have sex with him. Sex is private. Former, current, good girl here. I super took my time with anything sexual too, and despite the fact that I'm an adult now that slept with people, I still have a innocent reputation. Your boyfriend's attitude would have made me uncomfortable too. I would have felt suspicious. Did that mean he looked down on my friends who had had sex? Would that mean he'd feel differently about me if we did sleep together? I come from a culture that celebrates purity, but actually celebrating purity never felt safe to me. I preferred my partners not to care. I didn't like the pressure or the judgment, real or perceived. No advice, just validating your feelings. If you consider a woman less pure after you've touched her, maybe you should take a look at your own hands. Purity is a bullshit myth made up by religions and meant to control women. You won't be dirty or less of value after you have kissed or had sex with a man, and if he thinks so, he's a misogynist. I bet he doesn't hold himself to the same purity standards he has for women. I think it's creepy, and if it were me, I'd break up with him. I wonder if he'll try to have sex with you then leave you after, because you're no longer pure. This is creepy and gross, and he sounds completely immature. But the biggest problem I see with it is what's going to happen if you do have sex with him. Will you be able to be free and open and sexual, knowing that purity was so important to him? Will this Madonna/Ford dichotomy he has in his head prevent him from seeing you as a sexual being? Or worse, will it make him treat you differently once you're not pure? I see trouble in your road. This guy doesn't sound right. You say maybe he just has a big head about being with someone who has shot down a lot of guys. Sure, it would be reasonable to feel good being chosen by someone who is picky about who they date. But that's not what he said. You approached him about this, and he said he is glad you haven't been with anyone else. He told you point blank why he likes you, and you're trying to justify it with a reasonable explanation. I can't doubt that he does like you, but caring even a little about a person's purity is unacceptable. Partners should like you only for you, not your virginity. I think everyone else has made the point of your boyfriend being creepy, and why. My question is, what on earth is the rice purity test? As a 32 years old woman who used to be just like you, my only advice is listen to your gut. He'll be happy to take your virginity, just to throw it in your face later on, and call you names, whenever he gets upset. It's up to you how you feel about it, but it seems that it makes you uncomfortable, and that is a legitimate feeling. Framing your level of sexual activity as "purity" or "impurity" suggests that your boyfriend attaches negative moral value to sex. So what does that mean for when you two do have sex? Will he see you as lesser, as "sullied" somehow? Or is it fine because it's him you had sex with? Why do these things seemingly not apply to him? Would he be okay with you thinking he was "impure" for having kissed other girls before? Or is this a double standard? It's not "respectful" of him to judge you in this way, though I don't think you were much convinced by that idea anyway. You're both incredibly young. Perhaps he has been taught this, and he's internalized these ideas about women's "purity" without thinking about it much. If it's making you uncomfortable, you should discuss it with him. He's maybe not considered some of the implications of his emphasis on purity, and he might think about it more carefully if he knew that it was something which made you feel uncomfortable. Just remember, having sex or doing sexual things doesn't make you "impure" or bad or worthless in any way. Purity is a nonsense concept. You are a whole human with feelings and thoughts and all sorts of things about you which are so much more interesting and important than your level of sexual activity. I can speak from experience that sex is a lot more enjoyable and healthy when you're not worrying about "purity" too. Stay safe, stay informed, listen to your gut, and don't let anyone make you feel bad for your level of sexual activity or inactivity. While the other one thinks he's just kind of awkward and I should take the compliment. It's not a compliment. I would love for this friend of yours to explain how you're pure, because you haven't kissed anyone but me can be interpreted as a genuine compliment. Ever look at Mike Pence and say I'd totally date him? Yeah, me neither. Dude, he's obsessing over this issue. Feel free to break up with him, because this isn't normal behavior at all. His obsession is a red flag. Some guys are only concerned about taking girls' virginities, and he sounds like one of them. Might be time to move on. Relationships where this is a trying quickly become manipulative and abusive, and when he finally has sex with you, he's most likely going to drop you for the next virgin he can find, or he'll become so possessive you'll have no room to breathe all of your life. You are worth more than becoming a notch on his headboard. Don't become one. If his respect of you is contingent upon you not having a sexual history, he is pathetic and has bad values. I knew a guy like this. He dated a girl that was pure, even though the whole town knew different. Virgin Catholic schoolgirl analogy. All he talked about is how she was so much better than other. How she was pure and had never touches anyone. It was a grossness about it that lies just below the skin. It has nothing to do with the girl. It was his sick mindset of her having to be pure for him. Yet he was digging out the whole town with later night raves. Guys like this only see you as an object of their possessions to show to other. He most likely brags that he will get to have you before anyone else. Instead of looking at the sexual experience as a couple to share and grow, he is looking at it as a lame eye mark in this clan. Had you even kissed someone before him, your value to him would have dropped immensely. If you had anything more than a kiss, he wouldn't even touch you. All the while you know he isn't a virgin. Don't even assume. Don't let him know you ever touch yourself. Don't let him know you ever know about other men and sex. The onslaught of sexual jokes and names he will throw at you. Run. You are an object to deflower, and not a person to grow with. HM. This fixation doesn't speak highly of your boyfriend's character. I'd be super uncomfortable too. Only you can answer how much it bothers you. You know all his pros and cons, and if it's worth trying to send him some links about how creepy purity culture can be. This is weird. He shouldn't base your value on how pure you are. Tell him that you kissed a guy before you started dating him and see how he reacts. This will tell you everything you need to know. That's creepy. He views you more as an object than an individual human being. Almost as if he owns you. Leave immediately. Just bad vibes. Ugh, also be careful. Some guys think they've won something by taking a girl's virginity. The fact that he's talking about your purity, I can't even type that without cringing, with his friends is quite messed up and disrespectful. If he values your purity now, what's going to be his reaction when you first have sex? Will he still love the fact that he's the only man you have been with? What if you get married and try 4 kids? Will he see a pregnant woman as impure and let it affect his view of your relationship? These are things you need to know. There's no way to say whether the relationship is healthy or not, because we are third parties. But don't be afraid to ask him these things. When he's praising you for being pure, that's an opening to move the conversation into how he'll feel in the future when you inevitably take your relationship to further levels. There is nothing about sex that makes you unpure. It doesn't take anything away from you. You are still a moral person if you have sex, or just make out a little. I would leave a dude who bases my value on my sexuality. There is so much more to you than that, and you probably shouldn't put up with someone who doesn't see anything else valuable about you. Maybe your intelligence, empathy, athletic ability, creative ability, sense of humor, integrity. If he's not focusing on qualities rather than your sexuality, find someone who values you for who you are, not for what you have or haven't done sexually. If he's so obsessed with your purity, he may see it as a conquest, maybe. Like he was the first to kiss you, and maybe he wants to be the first for other things as well. Maybe that's what he wants, and he might think it makes him cool if he's the only person you've done stuff with. I know some dudes in high school get really excited to take a girl's virginity for some reason. I dated a guy when I was 16 who did the same type of things. Held anything we did over my head after we broke up, and refused to leave me alone afterward. Trust your gut feeling. I was in a relationship like this with a sociopath. He was my first love and the first person I was intimate with. He was very obsessed with my purity and thought that if another guy touched me, I was no longer pure or innocent. This was super damaging for me in the long run, as I was only 17 over 18 at the time, and it caused a lot of damage for my self-esteem and the way I perceived myself. The fact that you made this post clearly shows your instinct is telling you something is wrong. If you can communicate this to him, that it makes you uncomfortable, and he receives your opinion in a loving way, maybe it can get better. But if it gets worse, I suggest rethinking this relationship, because I'm now 24, and it took me years to stop associating my self-worth with how innocent my actions were. The guy I dated also ended up leaving me for a younger girl who was a virgin, because she had never touched a guy before. Ugh, some men treating a woman virginity like it's some kind of freshness seal, and do not use once opened. Like everyone said, no, it's not okay. Trust your gut. If he is bothered that you have had sexual relations before him, then he doesn't view you as a person. Virginity isn't sacred. That's rubbish forced onto us. That sounds creepy and gross. Trust me, a man that really respects you and cares about you as a human being doesn't give a crap about purity or past sexual partners, as long as you are safe. Talk to him and tell him it makes you uncomfortable, and his reaction should tell you all you need to know. girl. He is not respecting you. I've had somebody attempt to groom me when I was 19 and hadn't done anything sexual either, and he was really fixated and obsessed with this so-called purity. When I had just been insecure and too shy to do anything with anyone, but imagine if you did. Would their reaction be to judge you? Mock you? People who show signs of extreme obsessiveness I just immediately think of as a red flag. Just because they are not doing that to you doesn't mean they are not going to do that to someone else. Imagine if you got married, would he obsess over preventing you from cheating? Going beyond to control you and or restrain you from doing certain activities? And think about when he gets older, you would have to listen to him judge random people he doesn't even know. I'm not saying he'll be exactly like I described, but these are all the possibilities that you might have to face later if you don't catch them now. My current boyfriend is the exact opposite of all the things I described, and he even reaffirmed it by saying he'll still love me even if I had been with other people. You can't succeed at a relationship by just being with one person right away. Sometimes it takes multiple tries, and by the time you do meet one, you would have already been through several relationships. Your past relationships and actions don't define you, you define you. Find someone who loves you for you, and not like an unused sex doll. While I never had much luck in dating, what I found useful was looking at my friends' relationships and traits that my friends had that made me like them. How I felt about my friends, who they were, and what they did helped guide me to find the person I eventually married. That said, what would you think and feel if any of your friends regardless of gender were super focused on virginity/purity/being the first? Is that something you find makes you feel close to them or uncomfortable? If you find this as a trait that makes you feel uncomfortable, I would communicate with your boyfriend that you feel like this is all he values you for. Depending on how that conversation goes, decide if you want to keep him as a boyfriend or not. Communication and trusting your gut is key. He is the beginning of your dating journey. He doesn't have to be the end. Purity is a word that might be okay when talking about gold or spring water. Gold and spring water are simple UN living things. You on the other hand are a person starting out on your womanhood, and you will eventually do whatever sexual things appeal to you with the people you want touching your body. You will not be some impure, tarnished object. The thought that you're somehow going to be of less value if you have sex when you're ready is not a healthy one. It's creepy as one friend said, and it's awkward as the other said, but it's not really a compliment. Anything that ties your worth to your virginity tells you that you don't have worth if you're not a virgin, and that's not someone you need to date. Do listen to your gut on this. The obsession with purity is actually an obsession with shame. It's important that he hears that you wouldn't consider yourself diminished in value if you had been sexually active before. You are not chewing gum. To echo what a lot of other people are saying here, he seems to care more about the idea of you than you as person. That's going to be a problem later on if you continue in this relationship, if you don't at least address this. And if you do address this with him, make sure to pay attention to how he reacts. That could be a hint of things to come. You're almost an adult, and at that point, it's your body, your choice. You can have as many or as few sexual partners or situations as you want. There's no right answer. There's only what's right for you. Listen to yourself when something doesn't feel right. Your partner should respect your choices, not fetishize them or reject you if you change your mind. There's a book I read in a women's health class in college called The Purity Myth. I think you should read it. I think it'll help you understand why you feel so uncomfortable. This feeling you are experiencing over this situation is what you will later refer to as a red flag. Trust your gut. Being pure is such an outdated idea. It doesn't matter what you've done and with who, as long as you're sensible and safe. My advice is, don't go any further with this guy. You already know that it makes you uncomfortable. That's the most important thing. But other than that, can you imagine what he will be like if you do have sex? She gave me her purity, I'd flower at her. Gross. Seriously, find a better guy. This kind of purist attitude is not one you want in a partner, and certainly not one you want in a first-time partner. He doesn't deserve your purity. It's 2020. This guy is living in the 1900s. You are more than your virginity. How will he treat you if you two eventually have sex? There are boys out there who will appreciate your other attributes. Your intelligence, kindness, eyes, the way you smile, etc. End it. Oh, this is obsessively creepy. I think the only reason he asked you out is because of your purity. This seems like a huge red flag. Girl, you're way too young to be already dealing with this bullshit. I was uncomfortable just reading that. As someone who only lost her virginity at the age of 19, I had a few boyfriends before that who placed a lot of value on my purity. Now I'm glad I didn't end up with any of them. If I had, what would have happened after we'd had sex the first time? You have intrinsic value just by being a human being, and extra value for all aspects of your personality and morals. Being a virgin is not a personality trait. Sex is something some people do. Sex does not add or take away any of your value. Clearly, this boy believes your value is connected to your sex life, which is not only really weird, but also totally wrong. You should definitely feel free to talk to him about this, especially since it makes you uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, it is your choice how to deal with this. Coming from a similar situation, where I did not give this attitude enough weight, I say drop him fast. This is toxic, and usually leads to escalating abuse. Please, find someone to whom you are more than a possession. Does his purity ever come into question? Make sure this is an equal partnership, where he is seeing you as human, not an object of purity. Tell him how it makes you feel. BF, you understand that I'm a flawed person, and won't be pure forever, right? When you talk that way about my purity, it makes me feel like you are talking about an abstract idea of me, and not me as I am. It makes me feel like I'm on a pedestal, and doomed to fail to meet these expectations. I know you aren't as pure as you think I am, but I still care about you and this relationship, and it's hard to feel like you hang the weight of your feelings for me on a social construct designed to fail. Can we move away from talking about me like a bestial virgin? Obviously put your own words and feelings into it. I write like a scholarly sailor in the Victorian era, but you get the point. So let me get this right. He who has kissed other girls and technically qualifies for used goods wouldn't date you if you had even kissed a guy? Yeah. Okay, hypocrisy much? Also, seeing as you have this reputation of being pure, something to think about. Did he seek you out because of that? I don't know if giving your first time to this guy would be a good idea. Not to be going with the tide, but he does sound like he might have / develop some controlling tendencies. If your gut is telling you to nope out, trust yourself. It always appears to be right. It's just that our human nature is that we wish we would be wrong, but we aren't. You're 17, so I doubt and hope that marriage isn't anywhere in sight. But if you do decide to marry him, I would not do so without having sex. I think it's unwise to be legally bound to him without knowing how he will treat you / see you after you're no longer pure. Also, if this is something he deeply values, as it seems it is, will he also put that kind of pressure on your daughter? You're uncomfortable with him saying it to you. How uncomfortable will you be with him saying it to them? Not to mention how incredibly damaging it can be to have that put on you growing up. I don't necessarily see any problems with you continuing the relationship right now, but I'd proceed with caution if it gets more serious than just a high school relationship. Communication is important, but if he continues to value your purity and doesn't change his mindset, I wouldn't feel safe continue the relationship, as he doesn't have your best interest in mind. Talk to him about it and how it makes you feel, just in an open and non-confrontational way. There's plenty of advice for that around this sub. It could easily be a miscommunication. A lot of people have trouble articulating their feelings and fixate on something they perceive as a safe or easy compliment, and that can feel like they're valuing that about all else, when really they're just nervous and inexperienced. So just be like, hey, I've noticed that you talk an awful lot about my purity, and sometimes it makes me feel like that's the most important thing about me, which is kind of a bummer. It's a little like if I only said nice things about your car, or whatever thing he takes pride in. If you're looking to compliment me in the future, could you focus on some other stuff you like about me?